Good morning and welcome to Race Industry Now, the weekly webinar series from ePortrait presented to you by ARP, Performance Plus Global Logistic, Peak, Shop Monkey, and Fifth Third Bank Motorsports. I am Francisque Savignan, the founder and CEO of ePortrait, the global platform for the performance and racing industry. This is episode 338. And we're going to be talking fuel delivery with Fuelab. With me this morning are Judy Kin, the co-founder of ePortrait, and a wonderful host, Mr. Brad Gilley. Judy?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And I wanted to remind everyone that we have a YouTube channel. We have 350 plus webinars on there and different various videos. So if you have not signed up, enjoyed them, please, what do? Subscribe on those. So feel free to join us. In fact, I just came back from North Carolina yesterday, walked through the Hendrick Engine Builder shop, and there are head engine builders there loving what we're doing with our technical webinars. So please feel free, welcome, join us on our YouTube channel. And Mr. Brad, on to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Judy. And thank you, Francisque. And for the engine builders out there and really the racers and everybody who's attending here today. Today's topic is a great one because it applies really to everyone. And it doesn't matter, honestly, whether it's your race vehicle or your tow vehicle. We're talking about why your fuel system performance matters, the future of fuel delivery by Fuelab. And I can see Tanner Berg, the business development and race fuel systems manager, joining us right now. So Judy and Francis, look forward to seeing you guys here in just a short while. And I'm sure we're about to learn a whole lot. Really appreciate it. Awesome. Well, Tanner, welcome. How you doing today?
Oh, doing all right. How about yourself?
I'm fantastic. Look, it's a great time of year because for most people, race season is started. For some, maybe it's going to get started, but either way, everybody in this business is about to get a whole lot busier as things continue to get warmer, right?
Oh, yeah. We're picking up a lot and glad to see everybody getting out there in nice weather,
Yeah, well, this is going to be awesome. Well, let's talk about Fuelab first of all, because I know you guys have just such an amazing line of products from fuel pumps to fuel filters, pressure regulators, fuel systems, diesel performance, all kinds of accessories and everything. So tell us a little bit about Fuelab and what you do and what makes it unique.
So Fuelab was started about 12 years ago. Really, we saw a gap in the market to bring brushless technology to fuel pumps. And since then, we've been building upon that, looking for solutions and really trying to get ahead of the curve when it comes to fuel delivery. We are trying to push the envelope and we're really looking to make fuel systems as efficient as possible. And really that comes down to moving technology forward, specifically with brushless technology.
Yeah. Tell us about that, and specifically as it relates to what your products are and fuel pumps and everything, and how brushless is now becoming a huge advantage.
So for most people, brushless technology within a fuel pump is relatively new. We've, like I said, been doing it for about 10 years, but a lot of manufacturers are starting to see it more commonplace, especially within the OEM. Now, other industries have seen brushless technology really take off quite a bit, like RC cars, tools, things like that. So, the importance of brushless is really the longevity of the motor and the lack of amperage draw there. So with how efficient the motors are, it really gives us the opportunity to create these new systems that are going to be able to stay cooler. They're going to last longer. They're going to be, able to really push more fuel at this point.
Yeah, no, exactly. By the way, for those of you viewing right now, welcome. We appreciate you coming on here today. If you do have a question at any point, just feel free to type it into the chat, and we certainly love to talk about everything that you have. I'll probably jump around just a little bit. You mentioned amperage, and in talking to anybody, it doesn't matter what it is. If it's a crew chief not wanting to necessarily put a cool suit on a driver that day, if it's an engine builder, if it's anybody, they start talking about amperage because everything that draws ends up drawing horsepower. So let's talk about why that's so important, especially with the fuel pump technology.
Well, really with a lot of new pumps, especially with the power numbers that people are making nowadays, the 700 is the new 300, E85 is the new standard in most scenarios. So with that, a lot of, in-tank pumps and even external pumps, when they're a brushed motor, you're looking at 30 plus amps to really make the power you need. And, with a lot of cars where you have a 160 amp alternator and needing 2-3 fuel pumps, you're talking about almost your entire system being taken up by fuel pumps. So for us, being able to offer these pumps that have, 7 amps, 10 amps, 15 amps tops, and be able to support, 1,000 at the tire, that's huge. So especially when you start getting deeper into the motorsport systems and you have, 1, 2, maybe even 3 PDMs, and you start running out of these really high amperage channels with, brushless fans, electric water pumps, cool suits, things like that. Us being able to fit into these lower PDM channels really also give people the chance to save a lot of money by not having to stack another PDM because they need another 25 or 30 amp channel. So we really focus on how to meet the market demands where it comes to things like that. Our, like, with lift pumps and things like that, we see a lot of people where you end up drawing, 25 amps. And I mean, for me and my personal shop putting cars together, it's like, people looking for a third, fourth PDM, it gets so expensive so fast that if you're not able to really manage where these amperage draws are coming from, you're going to corner yourself there, and you're going to be buying whole extra units for, 2 channels. And it's just not a fun time.
No, it's not at all. And efficiencies and all of that. And look, there are certain systems in any vehicle and in any performance vehicle, especially that, look, if it doesn't work, it could really shut everything down. And obviously a fuel pump is something like that. So when we're talking about a brushless technology, and obviously something you guys have been working with for over a decade now, reliability always comes into question as well. Sometimes we talk about that racer compromise, like, hey, this is going to draw less, but is it going to last as long? How does brushless fit into that?
So with a brushless fuel pump, you don't I just will back up a little bit. So with a brushless motor, you do have those copper brushes that spin, and essentially they get worn over time. That's just, normal wear and tear. I mean, think of it more or less like an alternator. They do wear out over time, and it's kind of inevitable. With brushless, because you're using magnets, you're really able to get away from that. And so when it comes to how long they last, just because you have less wear items inside the pump itself, especially on the motor side, you're not seeing those same wear characteristics. You're getting, you're really not going to run into the same scenario that you do with a brushed pump. And for us, it comes down to not wanting to take things back apart. I mean, even then, we're so confident with our brushless stuff that we offer a lifetime warranty. So that is something where, that's how confident we are in this technology. When we're able to offer that with a product, it's, we hope to give confidence to racers the same way, where it's like, yeah, you're not going to be taking this thing back apart in the field or anything like that. So yeah, it's just kind of where brushless lines up. And that's why, like I said before, that's where almost everybody's going when it comes to electronics.
Outside of the benefits, as you're talking about, less amperage draw and things like that, is there anything else that becomes specific, or is there anything, I should say, that becomes specific to going brushless in that? I mean, ultimately, once the fuel is exiting the pump, is everything downstream pretty much the same that it is regardless?
In most cases, yeah. Outside of really us being able to maximize the flow out of these systems and needing to make sure that you have a regulator and filter that matches, just based on demand, so you're not choking the pump. But switching to brushless is a lot easier than most people think. When it comes to the controllers, because switching from DC to 3-phase, you have to have a controller. Some products it's offered integrated, some of them it's a standalone controller. But at the end of the day, getting power to the controller, just power ground, you can power the controller. And then that's where a lot of people get tripped up, because they see three-phase wires coming out of a controller, and all of a sudden they're like, yeah, but it's electronics, just power ground, right? So it's intimidating at first, just because there is this new factor that a lot of people haven't got to deal with, but it's not anything it's not, witchcraft. Like, this is a really easy part to integrate into any system and upgrade. We even have some drag guys who are coming out of mechanical pumps and switching to our, external pumps because, being able to move the weight around the car, and when you have, a surge tank up front that's 5 gallons and a mechanical pump, you can move 40 to 50 pounds around in the car. But these pumps are really lightweight, and I mean, you can kind of position them wherever with how easy it is to use the pickups and stuff. So you can really start to balance the car quite a bit differently by being able to capitalize on these pumps not having to live on the front of the motor.
Oh, wow. And that's huge. Again, now you really start talking the language of not only is there a benefit in the product, but in a benefit of how you can utilize the product in that. When you start talking about, different ways of hooking it up and all of that, I know there are a lot of things that Fuelab offers as far as accessories and different things. How easy are these solutions to integrate, especially with the products that could go along with this?
So with our product lineup, it was very focused on an external market. Because that was what fit our demographic first, but now as people are switching to more in-tank stuff, and again, this oddly comes back to weight balancing, trying to get a surge tank set up for, road course, for time attack, for drifting, that you really try to get everything as compact as possible. So we also offer a quick service surge tank, which fits inside a fuel cell. So it's a 24 volt plate with a lift pump and a surge tank that houses 1 or 2 pumps, but it supports up to like 1,500 wheel horsepower on E85, but it's all condensed within a nice package where you just drop it inside a fuel cell. So with that solution, it really allows you, again, to be able to start positioning your entire fuel system wherever you want. For example, like in an E46, you tend to put a very small fuel cell behind the passenger seat about where the stock fuel tank would go. And then now your lines are shorter, but you also have all the weight in the center of the car, and you have it as low as it can get. So this gives the opportunity to be able to have something that is, compact, it's in tank, but it's still, even in aftermarket, even with the fuel cell, is going to give you a weight balance like an OEM would.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. Tell us about PWM incorporation and why that's important.
So really, to the market, pulse width modulation hasn't been used in aftermarket. It's been hard for a lot of people to do, but now with ECU manufacturers really looking forward to being able to control ramp in, things like brushless fans. You have 80 amp on ramp in. And again, talking about the load that's already on the alternator, and you have fuel pumps running at full tilt, you're going to really drain the system fast. You're going to put a lot of strain on the alternator just to keep the car alive. So with pulse width modulation, OEMs have been doing it for quite some time. I mean, there's kind of primitive versions of it available in Subarus. They just do like 33, 66, 99%, but it's enough to where the pump's not running and getting hot. But it also means that it's more like fuel on demand. So with all of our systems, we use true speed control. We don't do that stepped style. So everything we do is 10% to 90%. So 0 to 10% is essentially 10% flow, because you shouldn't ever be dropping below that. And 90% to 100% is 100%, because it's all going to be kind of the same once you get to that point. But the important part there is that 10 to 90%. So when you're sitting in grid, you don't have your pumps running at 100%. You have your pumps running at 30% to keep the car alive. You have your pumps running at 50%. And being able to tie into pulse width modulation is getting to be one of the most important things in keeping a setup reliable. So with being able to control that, you have the capability to really manage heat. And heat is one of the biggest killers of fuel systems. So as soon as you start to boil the fuel, your pump will cavitate, just because, I mean, fluid's not going to be dense enough at that point. So if you're able to keep the pumps cool because they're not running as hard as they can at any time, it's going to really make it to where you can keep the system cool, keep the pumps happy, but then also not outrun any part of the system. It means that you don't need as much return line. It means that you don't need as big of a, well, you still need the same size fuel filter, but really it's your return line size. And if you think about PTFE lines, those lines aren't light. So again, we're able to pull a lot of weight out of the car and cost because we're able to start managing other parts of the system by utilizing the technology that we have.
Wow, that's really cool. And it's funny as you're talking about cavitation. Literally, a question just came in from the chat. Brushless is very cool technology, but do you have any technologies that reduce the air contamination in the fuel problem? This problem results from dissolved and entrained air/oxygen in the fuel. In other words, how do we better get the dissolved air oxygen out of the fuel?
So typically this is a very diesel focused question. I mean, you see a lot of air separators on the market. Realistically, a majority of that is actually created by your return line. So we've actually done a video on it and really how important it is for your return line to be submerged in fuel. So what happens is if your return is actually just spraying on top of the fuel, you're creating a lot of air into that system. You're creating those micro bubbles. And I mean, you can get it to foam. That's how much air you can put in the system. So really it's less about trying to get the air out of the fuel as it is making sure your system is set up properly. And a lot of that is in your return line and how that return actually feeds into the tank. Typically you want your return all the way below the fuel, as low as it can get, and making sure that it's not going to just be spraying. So anything that would cause that to be disrupted. So, like a clipped hard line or something like that. Normally you want to use something soft and something that you can bend and normally get kind of a swirl effect. That way, again, you can help really eliminate a lot of that spray and foam air.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And you mentioned diesel, and I know we've talked a lot about drag stuff, and I know people drag their diesels as well. But I automatically start thinking of tow vehicles and everything else and different things that are going to benefit me, not just at the racetrack, but also from the time I leave my shop until the time I get back to my shop. So a lot of the solutions that you guys have at Fuelab really apply to all of that as well, right?
Yeah, actually, that is something that we saw it happen a lot within the last year or so. We have a lot of guys who are not just leading to our systems for their race car, but their tow rigs. And again, this comes back to us being able to capitalize on our brushless pumps. They are a lower amperage draw, but they are designed for 12 to 24 volt systems. So pretty much anywhere it can fit in within a diesel application, but the reliability of a brushless is there. Now, everybody is using this as a lift pump. These aren't like common rail pumps and stuff like that. They are just lift pumps. But again, even then incorporation, we designed those even thinking about how the return line is going to be set up in that so that we can get a lot of air out of the system in that regard. We do have an air separator within our system that we offer. But at its core, it's really about how the system's set up.
All right. This is a follow up to the last question about air, and certainly something out of my understanding. The reduction of sulfur has resulted in fuel becoming much more thirsty for air/oxygen. Gasoline is 10 parts per million, I guess, and diesel is 15 ppm.
Yeah. Again, with a lot of our systems being less streetcar focused, we are more catered to drum fuels. We do have, most of our clientele is based around using drum E85, drum race fuel, even drum race diesel. Our number one or number two Pikes Peak car, I mean, that's coming up he runs a Volkswagen TDI motor. So that's really where our demographic lies. We haven't focused so much on the streetcar side because, our systems are definitely designed with a lot more power in mind. Granted, streetcars are getting real close to, the 4-digit mark out of a streetcar every day.
Yeah, I got you. And I know you've talked a lot about the advantages and everything, which is really cool. If I'm sitting here thinking to myself, okay, what do I need to do next to my race car? What's going to help me? What's going to be the big benefit? In my back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, my fuel pump works. My fuel system's fine. Two-part question. Does it really work like it should? What would be my biggest gain, or what would be some of the gains that I would be able to see in looking into Fuelab for helping with that?
So, really, we don't see as many people looking to swap out working pumps. That's not
Yeah.
common. It's not broke, don't fix it kind of mentality, which is totally sensible, especially within a race car where it's like you're not going to put the car down for no reason. A lot of it comes to data logging. Actually, that's a big part of what's making a lot of things identifiable earlier now. OEMs moving to CAN bus has been big, especially when you have the ability to access the system. You can really get vitals on everything, and you can actually get a lot of those vitals the same way within your system, just with a really good pressure sensor somewhere near the beginning of the pump. On an external pump, it's really easy to just add an 1/8 inch MPT fitting in line and be like, all right, well, what's pressure looking like at the pump, and then what's pressure looking like at the rail, or the end of the system. And really you can start to diagnose how the life of the pump is at that point. Or again, with PDMs, you can log amperage draw. Amperage draw is going to be the dead giveaway for absolutely all of that. So being able to start really diagnosing the system with good data collection is super important if you want to be able to evaluate your system. So for us, a lot of times, really it's when guys start to look for that top number that their motor is set up for, their system is set up for, and they're like, hey, we're on the dyno. Tuner said we're out of fuel. Tuner said we're out of fuel. It's like, okay, well, let's start looking at your system. And more times than not, it comes down to a fuel filter. Pumps tend to be relatively stout outside of being left in E85 for extended periods of time, or ethanol or methanol. But most of the time it's actually a fuel filter. A lot of people skip that and they're like, yeah, it's there, it's good. But being able to go back and start pulling apart each part of the system and kind of starting at the light switch and then working your way in is always how we recommend doing it. So looking at a fuel filter is super important because especially if you have to use pump stuff, that's when you'll really see a lot of contaminants. Pump E85 is notorious for that. So for maintenance intervals, it depends on the size of the filter, but typically we look at anywhere from yearly for our smaller filters, especially on pump E85, but you're talking like 2 years on our bigger filters for pump E85. And I'm using pump E85 as the barometer there because that's pretty much like the dirtiest fuel that we see. So it's easy to use that as our barometer.
Yeah, it's funny. See, I would think, well, fuel filter first, because that's probably the cheapest thing that I could see going wrong. And then let's start looking at other things. But along the way, and you guys offer fuel filters, in various forms as well, from inline to check valves and in tank and all of those other things as well. When I start thinking about replacing my system, saying, okay, you know what, I really am going brushless. I'm hearing the advantage. And to me, I think amperage draw is one of the big ones. But then you start talking about weight and all of that. Now I want a deep dive. I'm the type of person thinking, okay, well, it's not just the pump. What else do I need to do? And getting a complete system, a complete solution, all of that. Is this something that I can piecemeal together, or is this something that when I'm going out, I just need to really go all in?
So really, anytime that you're going to evaluate your system and you start at the pump, typically that's where you want to start, and you want to say, how much flow am I going to need for this setup? And so everything is kind of catered to that pump, because if you have a pump that flows 6 gallons a minute, but then you have a fuel filter that flows 3 gallons a minute, well, all of a sudden you're going to spike that amperage because it's getting choked by the fuel filter. And then let's say now you're like, all right, well, I got the pump, now I have a filter that flows 15 gallons a minute. All right, we're good. But then you get to your regulator. The regulator can only bypass 1 gallon a minute. We're getting into that. You really do have to do it in stages. A lot of times certain parts are overdone just when you do a typical setup, but normally it's really good to evaluate the entire system at one time, just because if one part, if the pump can outrun any other component, you're not going to be able to utilize those advantages of brushless, because you are going to spike the amperage draw because you're choking the pump at some point in the system.
Yeah, it's interesting. In my mind, I start to hear, people say, oh, I got a bigger intake. Okay, what did you do on the other end? I didn't do anything. Okay. Oh, I got a big exhaust. What did you do on the front end? Then what did you do to tune it? I mean, everything. And I think the point is, everything really plays off of itself. But to your point, I think you make a very good point, is really figuring out what your needs are, because, No one wants to buy too much, but gosh, it'd be even worse to not have enough, or at least have it choked up somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I mean, a lot of times we, even with like quick math, if somebody calls in and they're curious about their setup, we normally give them like a 15% correction factor. And we kind of baseline there, because that's normally enough to where if, you know, a tuner's feeling real spicy, they can be like, oh yeah, we can go up another 5 pounds. It's like, okay, well, I'm glad that we set you up for that. So really, we always try to help people set up a correction factor just in anticipation of things like that happening. I mean, the other part that we can't always balance out is, you know, we don't know the quality of your fuel. We don't know your elevation. We don't know a lot of the other factors that go into it at that time, calculating exactly how much fuel pump you need, or how much injector you need, or how much return you need. It's really comes down to, we are going to try to give you something very safe, but you should not run out of fuel as long as your projected number is correct. You know, we do have times where somebody's like, oh yeah, we plan to make 1,000 on race gas. And then they call us up and they're like, hey, I ran out of fuel pump. It's like, oh, well, you know, what's the kind of conditions? And then they're like, oh, well, you know, we're on the 85 and we're at like the 950 mark. And we're like, okay, yeah, we can't accommodate for that, because we need to know certain things. So that kind of goes back to the last question, is when you design the system, a lot of it is future proofing, because these systems do last so long that you can future proof, and you can say, okay, you know, I'm doing this build, and it's going to start off and it's going to be a 450 horsepower naturally aspirated on 92. And you're like, all right, yeah, we're good. And then it's like, but I think later we're going to go with, you know, 15 pounds on the blower, and we're going to run it on, you know, methanol. It's like, okay, well, with speed control, we can let you do a pump setup for 1,000 horsepower on methanol, but then slow the pump way down so that you're not just, you know, beating up the rest of the system. And then you could make 400 on pump gas. And then when the day comes where you're like, all right, well, let's dump methanol in the tank and turn it up, it's not a problem. So it's really being able to capitalize on a lot of these features where, you know, speed control has gotten that important, that you want to be able to have this system that you can overbuild, that you can future proof, that is set up for your wildest, you know, imagination, but then you can slow everything down to not outrun the rest of the system.
That's really cool. And boy, I'm sure what a huge asset as well. If you do have a question, I'll remind you, you can type something in the chat anytime if you've got a question about your system or anything that we're talking about specifically. And I do want to talk about your customers and having those conversations with them too in a minute here. But a question just came in. What's the purpose of a check valve in your fuel filters?
Actually, that's one of the things that we don't talk about. We have a lot. So it's not all of our fuel filters. We do offer a line that has check valves in them. So the entire thing is, you know, if you look at a regulator and you don't have a check valve in your system. So normally you have a single check valve on an in-tank pump and that's it, but it still bleeds off to a degree. So what'll happen is you pressurize the system, you shut your car off, and then you walk back out, and, you know, 30 minutes later, your fuel system has 0 PSI in it. So then you turn it on, you let the pump prime, pressurize the system. So with a filter carrying the check valve, we can actually hold pressure to the regulator, which means that you have less time priming. So again, it's more of a convenience thing, because you want to just start the car. So instead of having, you know, like a really in-depth pre-flight checklist, it's okay, well, we don't really have to worry about it. We can start it, or being able to make micro adjustments like that, being able to hold pressure helps a ton. So it's really a convenience kind of thing.
That's really cool. That's really cool. You know, Tanner, you've talked about having conversations with your customers. And one thing that I do really like in talking to a lot of the suppliers that we have on eParTrade is the fact that they do have that open dialogue with racers. And, you know, for someone to come in, look, I don't want to sit in my shop and guess when I can pick up the phone and ideally call you and say, hey, here's what I'm doing. What can you help me with? What do I need? How easy is that flow? How easy is that conversation?
So it's super easy. So for us, we have sales staff available by the phone from 8 to 5 Central Time. We are always available. We always answer the phone. You're always going to get one of 3 of us who does tech support. But you know, we're here to help with the fuel system, whether it's our system or not. Like that is our specialty. So, you know, a lot of times if somebody's just stumped on something, or, even trying to get some quick diagnostics where they're like, hey, I think my fuel pump is dead. This is what's happening. We'll walk you through it. And, sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, but we're there to help because, without us having trust within our customer base, without having trust in racers, then we're not going to be able to go very far ourselves. So that's why, like I said, like we work with a lot of competitors' items. Like, a lot of people have brand A, brand B, and then they use us as their filter or their pump. And it's like, okay, well, we'll help diagnose your entire system and we'll start with, our product, but then we'll work through your whole system because sometimes you could just need that extra set of eyes or ears on it. And, you never know who's going to be like, oh, hey, here's how simple it was. So yeah, we really like to make sure that our customer base knows that we are the experts and we care and we want to help. That's our big thing, right? I mean, it's in our name.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned you're in the Central Time Zone. You guys are in Illinois. I'm here in Fort Worth, and here's the good thing. It's not that everything is necessarily coming out of your warehouse, right? Like I could go to Dallas Performance, for example, or Summit Racing has a massive warehouse down in Arlington, Texas, for example. You guys have a pretty thorough dealer network, right?
Yeah. We have several master wholesalers, Summit, JAGS, Turn 14. We have a really good network, so we make sure everything's available. We are also available direct, so kind of wherever you can find us almost anywhere, which means that 9 times out of 10 you're going to have product in 2 days max. A lot of guys get stuff same day, but yeah, we make all of our products in-house. Every single one of our pumps is built, assembled, tested in-house. So we never have like a generic, we call them birth certificates for the pumps, but every pump goes on our flow bench. And then we look at exact flow rating of that pump in that condition set. And if it's not meeting what our advertised target is, then that pump will get quarantined and it'll get disassembled and we start from scratch. Because we need people to know that when they buy this pump and they look at this chart, it's not just, this is what this pump theoretically flows. It's, this is what your pump flowed. So we do have times where pumps flow more, which, obviously we're going to send that out the door because it's like, yeah, you're getting an even better pump, but it gives the customer a really high level of trust when they see that, hey, that's my serial number, that's my pump. And I know that at this flow rate, that's how much the pump's going to flow. So yeah, that goes into same thing with our customer service. And like I said earlier, our warranty, where as long as you have a serial number, you can call us and we will look it up. It doesn't matter where you bought it. It has a serial number on it, which means that we can track that and say, hey, this is what this should be. Or, sometimes people buy like a regulator or something and they buy it secondhand and they're like, hey, I'm trying to see exactly what this is. And we can look up stuff like that. So we can make sure that, we track all of our products really in depth to be able to say, hey, this is how old this is what it was originally like built out for. We don't share personals, but like important things like that about the product itself is going to be key to be able to utilize a lot of these products further down the line.
Wow. And if I do have an issue, is this something that's serviceable? Is it a warranty thing, or how does all of that work?
So with our filters and regulators, they're field serviceable. We sell replacement filters, we sell diaphragms, springs, hardware kits, almost any of that. With our pumps, that is a warranty thing where you'll get a hold of us and we'll give you an RMA. But the thing is that as long as somebody can say, hey, this is what's going on, then we can really help get the pump sorted out, which kind of a tangent with that. Really, a lot of the pumps, this is something that's not talked about a ton is pre-pump filtration. So yeah, kind of thinking about that as we talk, is a lot of our warranty stuff comes down to pre-pump filtration. So a lot of people just, especially with external pumps, because they don't have something that's integrated, they just set it down, put their feet in, and they're like, yeah, it's good to go. So a lot of these pumps are pretty sensitive when it comes to the internals of the pumps. So you need some form of a pre-filter, but you don't want it to choke the pump. So we always target like 100 micron stainless pre-pump filter. And then from there, you'll do, a 6 or a 10 micron post-pump filter. And for any level of fuel injector, we don't recommend anything above 10 micron. And then anything carbureted, nothing above 40 for a post-pump filter. but a lot of that is super important to keep, injectors clear, jets clear, stuff like that. And then the materials are always super important too. So with fuel filters, we offer 4 different elements. We have stainless, or I guess we have 2 different micron levels of stainless, fiberglass or microglass and paper. So the paper elements are not good for any level of ethanol, but the rest of the filters are good for every kind of fuel. And when I say it's everything outside of like nitro, we can do, all of our systems are built around the same kind of mentality that we don't know how the landscape's going to change, and trying to future proof everything. Almost all of our pumps are good for gasoline, ethanol, methanol, diesel. Like we really tried to make sure that our entire lineup is designed around working together so that you can use almost any of our components together, or, at least to a degree.
Tanner, you mentioned, pump gas to E85 and all of that. What would I need to know if I was making that transition?
So the biggest thing is really going up in pump size. So the quick math for E85 is always 30% more fuel. So that's, your baseline. So if you're on a 1 gallon a minute pump, then you're going to need, a 1.3 gallon a minute pump just to compensate for the extra amount of fuel that you're going to need. With that, you do want to make sure that your fuel filter is up to spec, and then your lines. So we always recommend going to an E85 compliant line or a PTFE lined hose. Most of those, available through all of our same distributors. So we always recommend that. But it's always important to know that you have enough pump. And that's where, if you add in that correction factor and you say 40% more pump, then you're going to be really trying to give yourself more headroom. But that initial target of needing 30 to 33% more right off the bat is where people get hung up. And that's what needs to be focused on primarily if you're going to make the switch. And then going methanol, it's 45%. So making those changes adds up really fast when you talk about pump sizing or power ratings. So making sure that you look at the correct power ratings on a pump, or when you're doing your flow, really making sure you're designed around that fuel and the specific gravity of that fuel.
Is there anything I need to know about keeping the fuel in the tank or anything like that?
Yeah. So typically with E85, we say don't store it for more than 2 weeks in just E85. Methanol, you don't want to be more than 3 days. And what happens is the alcohol inside it will actually start to corrode the pump. The ethanol will actually corrode the pump, and then it'll lock the pump in place. So for us, we always recommend draining and just storing it in gasoline. We don't want to store it dry, but do store it in gasoline, or store gasoline inside of it if it's an external pump. So for a lot of our drag bikes, that's kind of where we end up lining up, is they normally have 2 maps. One will be for, straight methanol, and then they'll have kind of an idle map that's just for gasoline so that they can store it. So a lot of guys, it's not so much off-season storage. It's like in between race storage that they'll actually do that. So it does harm the pump pretty quick if it's not stored properly. But the pumps are relatively resilient. We just don't want you to go to fire it up and have a pump lock up or something like that. So yeah, proper storage and maintenance is important there.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Look, a little bit of preventative maintenance goes a long, long way, especially when it's something that you're so dependent upon as the fuel system as well. What are some common questions that you do get when you're starting to get inquiries from people and all of that? What are some things that come up often?
Primarily, it comes down to people trying to calculate flow. We're actually getting ready to release an entire calculator that helps you start and say, okay, what's your target power? What kind of fuel are you using? Is it forced induction? Is it carbureted? How much boost are you running, if any? All of that adds up really fast, because a lot of times with these numbers, it gets skewed really fast because somebody's like, okay, this pump flows 500 liters an hour. It's like, okay, well, it's 500 liters an hour at 3 bar. So all of a sudden when somebody's like, okay, well, my injectors, when I have them on the bench, they're happiest and I get the best spray pattern at 60 PSI. Okay, well, now your base pressure is no longer 3 bar. And then how much boost are you running? Oh, well, I'm running 30 pounds. All right, so you're at 5 bar overall. You're at 90 PSI. So now most pumps really start to fall off up top right there. So a lot of people are like, yeah, but I bought a 500 liter per hour pump. How come your 500 liter per hour pump is going to do better? Well, this is where a lot of that brushless efficiency comes in. So if we have a pump that at 90 psi is only going to lose 20 liters an hour, then that's going to be the best possible solution. So the efficiency there and the math there is always going to be really important. So those pressures, a lot of people get tripped up and they're like, well, why? I don't know yet. It's like, okay, well, this is going to be key information because it drastically changes how much pump you need if you're going to be at 90 to 100 psi or if you're going to be at 10 psi.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and what's great is you guys at Fuelab, you have a pretty extensive YouTube page as well. One of the ones I haven't watched this one yet, but just fascinates me. I put an 1800 horsepower fuel pump on my minivan.
Oh, yeah.
But it's not just about fun. I mean, there's like real tutorial stuff in there as well. But it's great what you guys have been able to put out as well. That just helps people,
Yeah. Yeah. So like those guys, those are some really good guys that we've been working with for a couple of years now. They do a lot of like no prep drag stuff, but they do primarily 2.4 liter like Mopar builds. So like the SRT motors, and they do a bunch of swaps and they just put them in kind of everything and then turn them into drag cars. But their fuel demands are getting up there where they're, at like 2700 cc injectors. And it's crazy that it's something that these guys were like, hey, we want to do this, can you guys help? And that was how that conversation started, is that it was just a genuine question of, hey, we have a drag car with these giant injectors, we know that we need a lot of fuel, we don't know how much, like how can you guys help us? So yeah, we really try to focus on a lot of variants in motorsport. I know I've talked a lot about drag racing, but we're super heavily involved in the drift demographic now. A lot of that goes back to that surge tank we talked about, and even our external surge tanks, which carry the same technology. But being able to offer solutions for a lot of people who are like, hey, cars make more power now. We gotta adjust our setups for it. So I mean, 10 years ago, a drift car was a 300 to 400 horsepower car, and now you're talking 1200 horsepower on E85. That changes what we need to put in tank and fit in a surge tank and do all this other stuff at the same time, that it makes it to where we have to push what our pumps can do super fast. And, with all the other, I guess, arms of the aftermarket kind of trying to rush to be like, okay, well, how much boost do you want to run now? What do you need this to look like? Where do you want the power curve to come in? It makes it to where we have to push really fast to be able to match a lot of these demands and all these new numbers.
Yeah, definitely. Another question from the chat: how popular is your fuel pump / fuel regulator setup that controls the fuel return volume on its own? This seems like a great setup, but I don't see it promoted much.
Yeah, so that was one of our big early calling cards. So we have an electronic fuel pressure regulator that uses a pressure transducer to regulate the return flow line. So it measures return line pressure to make sure that you're only calling out for enough flow. So this setup is really focused on people who don't have a modern aftermarket ECU. So no Holley Terminator, no Link ECU, no Haltech, no Fuel Tech. Like, now that everybody has pulse width modulation integrated on like an old Resto mod, this is where this really fits in, so that you can do one of these really big pumps and then it just runs the speed wire to it. So being able to capitalize on PWM technology without having to have some big aftermarket ECU, or still while using a relatively stock setup, this was a really good solution early on. We don't promote it much now because, as I just said, a lot of the aftermarket ECU manufacturers, they have it covered. And with so many people using, plug and play Holley kits, because it's really easy to incorporate to almost any swap, with, Link ECU having all these boxes where you can just easily incorporate it, Haltech doing the exact same thing. It means that those pulse width modulation maps are already built in for a lot of these guys, and it's really easy to incorporate, so they don't need something to do it all standalone. Now, if you're not comfortable doing a PWM strategy within your setup, this is a good solution there.
Oh, Brad, you're on mute. Well, so
Thank you, Francis. I'm impressed because literally there's not anything that we've talked about or you've been asked about that you didn't have an instant and very thorough answer for. And obviously, what you guys are doing with Fuelab and the brushless technology and all of that, a huge asset to racers everywhere. This has just been so much fun and fascinating.
There is one last quick question, Brad, if you want to go through it quickly, and then we'll wrap it up.
Sure. Yeah, it just came through. When using an aftermarket ECU, is anyone using a flow meter in the return line to help control pump speed?
Typically not. Most people don't do it in the return line because if you use something like a surge tank that has an overflow, you're not going to be able to pressurize the return line properly because it's always going to feed out. So for aftermarket ECU guys, it's going to be on the pressure side. And normally it'll be, off of one of the fuel rails or the fuel rail, depending on whatever your engine configuration is. But that allows you to ramp pump speed up early. I know on my personal setups, I always put it before the rail so that I can get the pressure sensor to make the call out to the ECU prior to me ramping in. So, if I'm at, 25% TPS and then I start to roll into it, and then my pressure starts to drop, anything over 5 PSI, then it starts to make the call out for the pump. With a lot of these, a lot of people do tie it to TPS and not so much with just a pressure sensor. But typically with an aftermarket ECU, it's on the feed side, not the return side.
That's awesome. Tanner, this has been great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. And what a great education.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Tanner. And we pushed Fuelab back on the homepage of the ePortrait platform. So please go on ePortrait.com and connect with Tanner and everybody at Fuelab. It's a great team. It's one of those wonderful companies that really basically are what this industry is all about. So thank you very much for being with us today. This webinar has been recorded. It will be posted later on the ePortrait platform, distributed through our social media channel. We will be back live next week. We're going to be hosting our friends from Bike Speak. So we're going to have a special on Bike Speaks. So thank you very much for being with us today. Please, use the ePortrait platform. It's out there for you. And we'll see you guys next week. Thank you very much. Let's go racing. Bye-bye.
ePortrait is a digital platform that we've created basically to make life easier in the business community of auto racing.
ePortrait, there is no e-commerce. It's literally a connection just like at a trade show. So now, any time of the year, a buyer could reach out to a supplier.
When you see a product that you're interested in, all you need to do is click on request more information, and then from there, it is forwarded directly to the buyer or to the supplier.
ePortrait really eliminates having to travel, closing down your shop. Now you have a place to showcase globally your racing product and technology.
Land speed record holder George Poteet's Speed Demon rocketed 481 miles per hour at the Bonneville Salt Flats. You don't go that fast without ARP fasteners.
There is no way that we could go the speed that we've gone, the number of times we've gone, with a lesser quality bolt than ARP supplies to us. And we absolutely wouldn't be where we were today if it weren't for ARP.
When failure is not an option, it's ARP-bolts.com.
We're Performance Plus Global Logistics. Our team of dedicated performance industry and logistics experts get valuable cars and components to the track on time in top condition. We provide expedited logistics solutions for the performance industry using direct routes instead of deferred options, and communicate all necessary information to the appropriate resources to meet regulations and ensure a smooth transit and secure delivery, both domestically and internationally. And we exceed customer expectations by providing best-in-class service with an efficient and cost-effective system in place. Contact us today to book your next shipment.
You work as hard as your truck, and you have no time for downtime. That's why more truck owners trust Blue Def, America's #1 diesel exhaust fluid brand. Each batch is guaranteed pure, so you can avoid costly repairs caused by inferior DEF. Demand America's best for your truck. Blue Def and Blue Def Platinum. Put trust in your truck.
I'm Michael Cruz, owner and operator of Got Mechanic LLC. Whether we're out in the field or whether we're in the bay, me and my guys are able to actually go into parts procurement and be able to pull up these prices for our parts and use the parts matrix to actually get a profit off of these parts on the fly. Parts procurement makes it even better just with being able to get in contact with my local retailers.